Someone asks how you are. The question arrives in the break room at work, or through a text message at midnight, or across the table at dinner with people who have known you for years. The question is simple, almost weightless in its asking. How are you? 3 words that require an answer, and you already know what that answer will be before your mouth opens, before your fingers move across the screen, before you even register the question consciously. I'm fine. I'm good. I'm okay, thanks for asking. The words come out smooth, practiced, automatic as breathing. Your face arranges itself into the appropriate expression, a small smile, a slight nod, the subtle relaxation of features that signals everything is under control. And maybe it is true in some narrow technical sense. You are alive. You are functioning. You showed up today. But beneath that reflexive response, beneath the armor of those 2 words, I'm fine, there exists an entirely different landscape. Last night, you lay awake until 3 in the morning, your mind cycling through the same anxious loops it has traced for weeks. This morning, you stared at your reflection in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the exhaustion looking back. An hour ago, you received news that made your chest tighten and your hands shake, but you breathed through it, steadied yourself, and moved on to the next task, because that is what you do. That is what you have always done. The distance between I'm fine and the truth of your inner weather is vast enough to hold an ocean. On the surface, you are calm water, reflecting sunlight, giving nothing away. Below, there are currents and undertows, regions of cold darkness, storms that never break the surface, but churn endlessly in the deep. And you have learned to live in both places simultaneously, to maintain the surface while surviving the depths. This automatic response is not exactly a lie, though it feels dishonest in the marrow of your bones. It is more like a wall you have built so carefully, so meticulously, that you no longer remember a time when it was not there. It is a uniform you put on each morning, along with your clothes, a script you have rehearsed until every line falls naturally from your tongue. When someone asks how you are, you do not pause to check the truth of your interior. You simply play your part. You say the words that keep the machinery of normal interaction running smoothly, because the alternative, the truth, feels impossibly dangerous. To say I'm not okay would be to crack the wall, to let someone see the mess and exhaustion and fear you have worked so hard to contain. It would be to admit that you are not as strong as you appear, not as capable, not as together. And you have learned through years of careful conditioning that strength is currency in this world. Weakness is something to be hidden, managed, denied. So you smile, you say you're fine. You change the subject or deflect with humor or ask about them instead, redirecting attention like a magician's sleight of hand. And the conversation moves on, and everyone is comfortable, and no one has to bear the weight of your actual experience, including you. But here is the question that haunts the space behind your practiced answer. What are you protecting by maintaining this facade? What are you afraid will happen if someone sees past the armor to the vulnerability beneath, and perhaps more? Importantly, what is this armor preventing you from accessing? What connection, what relief, what understanding are you locked away from while you stand guard at the gate of your own pain, turning everyone away with those automatic words? I'm fine, I'm okay. Don't worry about me. Today we are going to look closely at this phenomenon, not to judge it or dismantle it with force, but to understand it. To see the deep psychology behind why the strongest seeming people are often the ones who most need someone to ask a second time, are you really okay? Before we go further, before we examine why this armor exists and what it costs to wear it, there is something essential to understand. This reflexive, I'm fine, is not dishonesty in the way we typically understand that word. It is not manipulation or deception designed to trick others for personal gain. It is something far more complex, far more rooted in survival and self-preservation than simple lies could ever be. When you say you are okay when you are not trying to fool anyone. You are trying to protect yourself. And sometimes in a way that might seem contradictory, you are trying to protect the people asking the question. You carry an instinct learned over years that your pain is too much for others to hold, that your struggle will burden them, exhaust them, drive them away. So you offer them the easy answer, the comfortable answer, the one that lets everyone move forward without the heaviness of real emotional labor. This is not weakness. This is not moral failure. This is a survival strategy that once served you and perhaps still does in certain contexts. The person who always says they are fine is not a liar. They are a guard standing watch over something they believe must be protected at all costs. Imagine your inner world as a kingdom, not a grand palace of marble and gold, but a real place with all its complexity. There are rooms of joy and rooms of sorrow, corridors where old griefs wander, gardens where hope tries to grow in difficult soil. And at the entrance to this kingdom stands a sentinel. This sentinel is your "I'm fine." This sentinel is the part of you that decides what gets in and what gets out, who can enter and what can be revealed. The sentinel does not stand there because he is cruel or dishonest. He stands there because he has been given orders, learned through experience and repetition, and sometimes through pain. His job is not to lie, but to control access, to maintain security, to prevent what he has learned to see as danger. If weakness is allowed to show, he believes everything will fall apart. If the chaos inside becomes visible to those outside, the kingdom will be invaded, conquered, destroyed. If people see the truth of your struggles, they will leave. Or they will think less of you, or they will try to fix you in ways that only make things worse. So the sentinel stands firm. When someone approaches and asks how things are inside, he gives the standard response. All is well, the kingdom is strong, there is nothing to worry about here. Move along. And in his mind, in the logic that has been programmed into him through years of training, he is doing his job. He is protecting the kingdom. He is keeping everyone safe, the people outside from the burden of your reality, and you inside from the vulnerability of being truly seen. This is not villainy. This is vigilance born from fear control, born from a deep-seated belief that the alternative is collapse. The sentinel believes that if he steps aside, if he lets down his guard, if he speaks the truth about the exhaustion and confusion and pain happening inside those walls, everything you have built will crumble. Your relationships will fracture. Your reputation will shatter. The carefully maintained image of competence and strength that defines how others see you, and perhaps how you see yourself, will dissolve into nothing. So he stands there day after day, giving the same answer. I'm fine. I'm okay. Everything is under control. And behind him, inside the kingdom, you live with the strange dissonance of being both protected and imprisoned by the same force. The sentinel keeps danger out, but he also keeps connection from getting in. He maintains the walls, but walls work both ways. They keep you safe from judgment and rejection, but they also keep you isolated from genuine understanding and intimacy. The armor of I'm fine was forged for a reason. It was not put on carelessly or without cause. To understand why someone cannot take it off, we must first understand how it came to fit so perfectly, how it became so essential that removing it feels like standing naked in a storm. We must look at the forces that taught them over time that this protection was necessary for survival. The armor was not born in a single moment. It was forged gradually, piece by piece, through experiences that taught you what was safe and what was dangerous, what earned approval and what brought rejection. Understanding where this instinct came from requires looking back at the quiet lessons absorbed over years, the messages received, not through explicit instruction, but through pattern and repetition, and the slow accumulation of what the world seemed to be telling you about the value of your vulnerability. For some, it begins in childhood with a role assignment so subtle you never questioned it. You were the strong one, the responsible one, the child who could be counted on when everything else felt unstable. Maybe you had younger siblings who needed someone to model resilience. Maybe your parents were struggling with money, with health, with the weight of their own unprocessed pain, and you learned that adding your needs to their burden would only make everything harder, so you became the rock, the steady one, the child who smiled and said everything was fine even when your own small heart was breaking, because you understood without anyone saying it directly that your job was to be easy, to be strong, to not add to the chaos. And when you played that role well, when you swallowed your fear and your sadness and your confusion, you were rewarded. You were told how mature you were, how proud everyone was of you, how lucky they were to have a child who understood. Your value became tangled up with your strength. Your worth was proven through your ability to not need help, to not fall apart, to remain functional when others could not. And somewhere in that process, a belief calcified in your bones. If you stop being strong, you stop being lovable. If you admit you are not okay, you betray the very thing that makes you valuable to the people you love. Or perhaps the armor formed through a different kind of lesson, through the experience of showing your true feelings and having them dismissed or minimized or corrected. You tried to express pain and someone told you it was not that bad. You tried to express fear and someone told you to stop being so sensitive. You cried and someone told you that crying was weak, that you were overreacting, that you needed to toughen up. The message arrived in different forms, depending on your gender, your culture, your family's particular emotional vocabulary. Boys were told that real men do not show emotion. Girls were told to smile more, to be pleasant, to not make others uncomfortable with their intensity. Each time you revealed genuine emotion and met with invalidation, you learned a lesson about what was acceptable and what was not. You learned that your inner experience was somehow wrong, excessive, inappropriate, so you began to moderate it, to question whether what you felt was legitimate, to wonder if maybe you were too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. The armor formed as a way to protect yourself from that invalidation, to present only the emotions others could handle, to keep the rest hidden where they could not be judged and found wanting. And beneath all of this runs a fear so powerful it can shape an entire life, the terror of becoming a burden. You have watched people grow exhausted under the weight of other people's problems. You have seen relationships fracture when one person needed too much for too long. You have witnessed the subtle withdrawal that happens when someone's pain becomes inconvenient or uncomfortable or simply too constant to bear. And you have made a decision, perhaps unconsciously, that you will not be that person. You will not be the one who asks too much, who needs too much, who drains the energy from every room they enter. So when pain comes, you contain it. When exhaustion arrives, you hide it. When your inner world is screaming for help, you smile and say you are managing just fine, because in your calculus of love and connection, your needs must be sacrificed to preserve the relationship. You believe in a place deeper than logic, that if people truly saw how much you struggle, they would leave. Not because they are cruel, but because everyone has limits. Everyone has their own problems, and adding yours to the pile feels like an act of selfishness you cannot allow yourself to commit. The world outside your personal relationships reinforces these lessons through broader cultural messages. The workplace celebrates those who never show strain, who respond to every challenge with unshakable positivity, who meet deadlines and exceed expectations regardless of what is happening in their private lives. Vulnerability at work is seen as unprofessional. Admitting you are overwhelmed is interpreted as incompetence. The culture demands that you perform wellness, that you radiate capability, that you transform every problem into an opportunity for growth. To say you are struggling is to risk being passed over, sidelined, seen as someone who cannot handle the pressure. Social media amplifies this pressure, filling your feed with images of people whose lives appear effortlessly successful, whose challenges are always overcome with grace and gratitude, who have learned to frame even their hardships as inspiring narratives of triumph. The message is clear. Suffering is acceptable only if you can package it into a story of resilience. Pain is shareable only if it comes with a lesson, a silver lining, a redemptive arc. Raw, ongoing struggle without resolution or meaning is something to be hidden because it disrupts the narrative that we are all supposed to maintain. And for some, the armor forms in response to experiences that shattered their sense of safety so completely that control became the only thing left to hold on to. When trauma robs you of agency, when circumstances render you powerless, the ability to control how others perceive you becomes a way to reclaim some small territory of autonomy. You may not be able to control what happened to you, but you can control what people see. You can choose the face you show the world. Saying "I'm fine" when you are falling apart becomes an act of defiance, a way of asserting that some part of you remains untouched, unbroken, still in command. But armor, no matter how necessary it once was, no matter how well it has protected you, carries a cost that accumulates silently over time. The price is not paid all at once in some dramatic collapse. It is paid in small increments, in moments you barely notice, in a slow erosion of something essential that you may not even realize you are losing until you reach for it and find only absence. The first cost is loneliness. Not the obvious loneliness of being alone, but something far more painful, the loneliness of being surrounded by people who do not know you. You can be in a room full of friends, in a relationship of years, in a family that loves you, and still experience a solitude so profound it feels like living behind glass. People can see you, can hear your voice, can touch your hand, but they cannot reach the part of you that is most real, most vulnerable, most in need of witness. Because that part remains locked away behind the armor, behind the automatic "I'm fine" behind the wall you have built so carefully that even you sometimes forget it is there. You maintain relationships, but at a distance. People know the version of you that is competent and stable and okay. They know your humor, your capabilities, your public self, but they do not know the you that wakes at 3 a.m. gripped by nameless anxiety. They do not know the you that sits in the car after arriving home, unable to summon the energy to open the door. They do not know the weight you carry or the effort it takes to appear as light as you do. And because they do not know these things, they cannot offer comfort for them. They cannot sit with you in the darkness because you have never let them see that the darkness exists. The paradox is cruel in its precision. You wear the armor to protect your relationships, to avoid burdening the people you love, to maintain connection by not demanding too much. But in doing so, you create the very isolation you feared. You preserve the relationships but hollow them out from the inside. People stay close to you, but they are close to a performance, not to the person performing. And you are left with the strange ache of being loved for someone you are only pretending to be. Over time, something even more insidious occurs. You begin to lose track of your own truth. When you spend years responding to "how are you" with automatic reassurance, when you practice the performance of wellness so consistently that it becomes second nature, the line between the mask and the face beneath it starts to blur. You tell yourself you are fine so many times that you begin to believe it, even when your body is screaming otherwise. You override your own signals, the fatigue, the tension, the sadness that sits in your chest like a stone, because acknowledging them would mean admitting the performance is just that, a performance. Someone asks how you feel, and you realize you genuinely do not know anymore. You have spent so long translating every internal experience into the language of fine and okay, and managing that, you have lost fluency in the dialect of your own emotional landscape. You cannot name what you are feeling because you have not allowed yourself to feel it. You have been too busy containing it, controlling it, ensuring it does not leak out where others might see. And now, when you try to check in with yourself, you find only static, only the rehearsed responses, only the armor, looking back at you from where your actual self should be. The physical toll arrives quietly but relentlessly. Emotions that are not expressed do not simply vanish. They do not dissolve because you refuse to acknowledge them. They go underground and they manifest in other ways. Your jaw clenches unconsciously throughout the day. Your shoulders carry tension that no amount of stretching can release. Headaches arrive without warning and linger without explanation. Your stomach knots itself into patterns of pain that doctors cannot quite diagnose. You are exhausted in a way that sleep does not touch, because the exhaustion comes not from what you are doing, but from what you are constantly suppressing. The performance of being fine requires enormous energy. Every interaction becomes a calculation. You monitor your facial expressions, modulate your tone, choose words carefully to maintain the impression of stability. You are vigilant about what you reveal and what you conceal, always aware of the wall and your duty to maintain it. This constant self-surveillance, this endless management of how you appear to others, drains you in ways that are invisible to everyone, including yourself. You think you are tired from work, from obligations, from the normal demands of life. But underneath you are tired from the weight of the armor itself, from carrying it every moment of every day, from never being allowed to set it down. The armor that once protected you has become a prison. The wall that once kept danger out now keeps life from getting in. And somewhere in the growing silence behind that wall, a question begins to form, quiet but insistent. How much longer can you sustain this? And at what point does the cost of protection exceed the cost of vulnerability? The path forward is not what you might expect. It is not about tearing down the wall in one dramatic gesture, not about forcing yourself to confess every hidden struggle to everyone you know, not about abandoning the armor entirely and standing exposed before a world that may not yet be safe. That kind of radical vulnerability, demanded all at once, is not healing. It is simply another form of violence against yourself. Instead, the path begins in the smallest, quietest place imaginable. It begins with you alone in a moment when no one is watching and no performance is required. It begins with the radical act of telling yourself the truth. You do not need an audience for this. You do not need to speak it aloud or share it with anyone. You need only to stop in some private moment and ask yourself the question you have been deflecting from others for so long. How am I really a? And then instead of reaching for the automatic answer, instead of letting the sentinel speak, you wait, you listen, you notice what arises in the silence. Maybe you feel it in your body first, the tightness in your chest, the heaviness in your limbs, the exhaustion that no amount of sleep has touched. Maybe it comes as an image, a memory, a sudden awareness of how long you have been holding your breath. Maybe it arrives as words, I am tired, I am scared, I am lonely, I am not okay. You do not need to do anything with these truths except acknowledge them. You do not need to fix them, or explain them, or justify them. You simply need to stop pretending, if only to yourself, that they do not exist. This is where healing begins, not in grand revelations or dramatic confessions, but in the small private act of witnessing your own experience without judgment. You might write it down in a journal that no one else will read. You might say it quietly to yourself in the car, or in the shower, or in the dark before sleep. The words might feel strange in your mouth, unfamiliar after years of their opposite, but they are the first step toward reclaiming the self that has been hidden behind the armor, the first movement toward truth after a long season of performance. Once you have practiced honesty with yourself, once you have remembered what it feels like to acknowledge your own reality without immediately containing or dismissing it, you can begin to consider the next step, not a leap, but an expansion. You can begin to identify one person, just one who might be safe enough to let in. This person is not necessarily the one closest to you or the one you have known longest. They are the person who has shown through their own behavior that they can hold difficulty without trying to fix it, that they can witness pain without becoming uncomfortable or dismissive. They are the person who asks how you are and then waits, actually waits for a real answer. The person whose own life includes enough honesty about struggle that you know they will not judge yours. You do not need to tell them everything. You do not need to open the gates fully and let them see every corner of your inner kingdom. You need only to practice what might be called limited truth. The next time they ask how you are, instead of the reflexive, I'm fine, you might say something smaller, something safer, but something real. Today has been kind of hard. Or, I'm feeling pretty tired lately. Or simply, I'm not sure honestly. These small admissions are not weakness. They are experiments in trust. They are ways of testing whether the world will collapse if you let the armor slip just slightly. And what you will likely discover in these careful experiments is that the people who are worth having in your life do not flee from your humanity. They do not judge you for not being endlessly resilient. They often, in fact, respond with relief. Relief that you have finally given them permission to be real with you too. Relief that the performance neither of you wanted to maintain can finally be set aside. You might create for yourself a scale, a way of speaking about your internal state that feels less binary than the old choice between fine and falling apart. When someone asks how you are, you might say, I'm at about a 6 today, or maybe a 4 this week. This gives you a language for honesty that does not require full disclosure, that allows you to communicate something true without having to explain everything. It is a bridge between total concealment and total revelation, a middle ground, where you can practice being seen without feeling completely exposed. And for those on the other side of this dynamic, for those who love someone who always says they are fine, there is work to be done as well. The question, how are you, has been asked so many times with so little genuine curiosity that it has become ritual rather than inquiry. If you want to reach someone behind their armor, you must ask differently. You must ask in a way that communicates you are actually ready to hear the answer, whatever it might be. Instead of the casual, how are you, that can be deflected with a smile, try something more specific, more grounded. How has this week actually been for you? Or, you seem tired, is everything feeling manageable? And when they give you the automatic, I'm fine, do not simply accept it and move on. Pause. Hold their gaze for a moment and ask again more gently, are you really okay? That second question, asked with genuine care and genuine patience, can be the difference between a wall remaining intact and a door beginning to open. It communicates that you see past the performance, that you are not satisfied with the rehearsed answer, that you are willing to wait for something true. It gives them permission to let the armor slip, if only for a moment, if only with you. There is a belief about strength that has been passed down through generations, reinforced by every hero's journey and every success story embedded so deeply in the culture that it feels like truth. The belief is this: strength means never breaking. Strength means standing firm against everything the world throws at you. Strength means being the person who does not need help, who does not falter, who carries every burden without complaint and emerges intact on the other side. This belief has made soldiers out of people who needed permission to be human. It has created a world full of the walking wounded people who have survived everything except the terrible isolation of surviving it alone. And it has taught us that the armor of "I'm fine" is not just protective, but essential, not just useful, but definitional. That to remove it would be to lose the very thing that makes us valuable. But there is another understanding of strength, one that has been whispering beneath the louder narrative all along. It says that strength is not the absence of breaking, but the courage to break in front of someone and trust they will not leave. It says that resilience is not about standing alone, but about knowing when to reach for a hand. It says that the strongest thing you can do is not to pretend you are fine when you are falling apart, but to speak the truth of your falling and allow yourself to be caught. The armor has served you well. It has protected you through seasons when protection was necessary, through environments where vulnerability truly was dangerous, through times when you were too young or too alone to have any other option. It has gotten you here to this moment alive and functional and still moving forward. The armor deserves gratitude, not shame. It deserves acknowledgement for the ways it kept you safe when safety was not guaranteed. But the armor was always meant to be temporary. It was meant for the battlefield, not for the whole of life. And what was once protective can become constrictive. What once shielded you from harm can now prevent you from accessing the very things that make life worth living. Genuine connection, authentic intimacy, the profound relief of being known in your entirety and loved not despite your struggles, but with them as part of the full truth of who you are. The deepest connections between human beings are not built on polished surfaces. They are not formed in the sharing of strengths and successes and the carefully curated highlights of existence. They are forged in the moments when someone allows themselves to be seen in their mess, in their confusion, in their exhaustion, and the person witnessing them does not flinch or flee, but simply stays. Connection is not born in perfection. It is born in the cracks in the places where the armor has worn thin, in the moments of honest struggle that remind us we are all fragile, all uncertain, all just trying our best with what we have been given. When you say, "I'm not okay" to someone who can hold that truth without trying to immediately fix it or dismiss it, something sacred happens. You discover that you are not as alone as you believed. You discover that your pain does not make you unlovable, but more human, more accessible, more real. You discover that the thing you have been most afraid to reveal is often the very thing that allows genuine intimacy to form. Not because people love your suffering, but because they love you, and suffering is part of you. And to be loved fully means to be loved in your wholeness, not just in your highlight reel. This is not a call to abandon all protection, to tear off the armor, and stand vulnerable before everyone in every circumstance. Some people and some places are still not safe. Some contexts still require boundaries, still demand a level of self-protection that is wise rather than fearful. The path forward is not recklessness, but discernment, learning to tell the difference between protection that serves you and protection that imprisons you, between guardedness born from wisdom and guardedness born from old wounds that no longer need to dictate present choices. The invitation is simply this: to consider that the armor might not need to be worn every moment of every day, that there might be people with whom you can remove it, spaces where you can rest from the constant performance of wellness, moments when you can speak the truth of your experience and find that the world does not end, that love does not evaporate, that you are not rejected or abandoned, but held more tenderly for your honesty. The armor is heavy. You have been carrying it for so long that you may have forgotten how much energy it requires to keep it in place, how much of your life force goes into maintaining the wall rather than living behind it. But now perhaps you can begin to imagine setting it down. Not everywhere, not with everyone, but somewhere, with someone. In some small corner of your life, where you allow yourself to be tired, to be uncertain, to be not okay, and to discover that this does not make you less worthy of love, but more available to receive it. Because strength, real strength, the kind that sustains rather than exhausts, is not found in never falling. It is found in the courage to say when you are falling, and the trust that someone will be there to help you stand. Not to carry you forever, but to remind you that you were never meant to walk this difficult path alone, and that the moment you stop pretending to be fine is often the moment you finally begin to heal. You are allowed to not be okay, and you are still in your not okayness entirely deserving of love.